My name is Himanshu Mishra. I am Orco Hunter on GitHub, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, Orkut, whatever you folks use. I'm a product manager at Harness. I was previously at Spotify. I hope you have heard of Spotify. It's this music company. And I was part of their Backstage core team. I recently joined Harness, so this is my week 2. I was previously an engineer and a developer advocate as well. So yeah, I've been pretty hands-on. How many of you are engineers in this room? Engineers, data scientists, data developers, if you create stuff, or everyone is just a, oh, all right. Great to see engineers in the house. So yeah, we're gonna be talking about Backstage. It's an open platform. By the way, it's an open source project. You can check it out on GitHub. Backstage.io is the official brand name. It's an open platform for building internal developer portals. It was created at Spotify. Oh, it's coming from the other room. I was like, who is shouting so loud in this room? It's all right, sorry. It was created at Spotify back in 2015 and then later open sourced in March 2020. And since open sourcing it, Backstage has become an incubated project at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. It is home to Kubernetes, Envoy, and other projects. But hold on, what is a developer portal and what do you mean by that? So it's a fairly new product category and it's good to spend some time explaining what developer portal is and more importantly, what it isn't. Those of you who were here in the last talk, we heard a lot about single pane of glass and that's exactly what I'm gonna be shouting in every 2 minutes. But jokes aside, yeah, Backstage is misrepresented sometimes as your internal developer platform, which it isn't. So if you use a bunch of cloud services, hundreds of infrastructure tools, they're gonna still be there, and Backstage is not to replace them. But first of all, a bit of context on why this project was created. So you might have heard of this phrase called software is eating the world. Well, it still is, and there's an explosion of available technologies to do just a single task. Think about it. Just if you need a server, there's like 100 companies trying to take your money and give you a server. If you need to do a security audit, how many companies are there which can do that for you? If you need insights inside your code, observability, think about it. There's so many technologies available to do just a single task. No single developer can claim that they know all their individual interfaces. As a result, inside your company, it's getting complicated for just a newcomer, for example, to learn all of them in depth and learn the individual interfaces. Your whole stack is getting complicated, and it's preventing things like onboarding an engineer very fast inside a company, and things like collaboration inside the own company. If one team is using Grafana for something, other team is using XYZ for something, when they cannot easily go and contribute to this other team because everyone is using different stack. So a developer portal is one single pane of glass, which was said so many times in the last talk, but it really is one front end for your entire infrastructure. So that's a developer portal for you inside your own company. It integrates all your existing tooling, your CI/CD, your Kubernetes monitoring, deployments, security tools, Snyk, testing, your website, Lighthouse, and so on. It shows all of your services, applications, data pipelines, whatever you maintain inside your own company or whatever your teams build and manage inside your company. And it shows you documentation, technical documentation for your existing components, for your APIs, tutorials, org charts, so many types of docs, right? All in one place so that your developers can focus on running your business and not worry about all these individual interfaces and learn them. But a little bit of why Backstage was created. So like every development shop, Spotify was no different. They needed speed without compromising safety. They needed scale without compromising quality and the ability to tame the increasingly chaotic software ecosystem. As you grow, Spotify is right now at 8,000 employees, and it has about 30,000 software components running inside their production system. So there's a problem of scalability in terms of engineering, but there's also a scale of people and organization, where Backstage actually hits. So yeah, if Spotify was able to tame that chaos over 6 years of maintaining Backstage, it could work anywhere, and actually is. So imagine your organization, you are very new, you are, let's say, 1,000 employees, but you're growing now. You're gonna have, so do you know how many developers are there in the world overall? How many developers exist? Is it 1 million? Is it 100 million? Is it 200K? Any rough idea about an estimate? All right, I'm gonna reveal the answer. So GitHub, Stack Overflow, all these companies do statistics, and there's 30 million developers in the world. And your company is also gonna grow and gonna have a lot of these engineers. You're gonna have to onboard them on time. And that's something you're gonna face a problem as you grow and increase your stack to do all these things. So yeah, I mean, your headcount gets increasing, but same with Spotify, that's what happened with them. But they were tracking a key metric, how much time it takes for a new engineer to create their 10th pull request. Do you know pull request? I mean, I think all of you know about it. So how many time it takes for you to create your 10th PR, merge it, and do your job? And that number was skyrocketing to 60 days. It takes an engineer 2 months to fully understand the infrastructure of the company and then contribute like 10th documentation pull request, for example. So Spotify built this portal to enable that, and now it's working for them for hundreds of teams, thousands of engineers, and tens of thousands of software components inside the company. All right, enough about the history. But what does Backstage do? So there are 3 main jobs to be done from Backstage. It lets you create new software in seconds, aligned to your best practices, to your company's best practices. It lets you manage all the software you own in one centralized location. And it lets you explore your existing software ecosystem inside your company to enable collaboration across org. That's it, 3 main jobs to be done. So instead of being frustrated by architecture, your developers get back control over it so that they can free up and then focus on building that one particular app. Imagine, what does a developer do on a daily basis? They're probably adding a new something in the app, something in the backend, a new endpoint. That's what most of the time developers are doing. Why do they have to go to these 100 places to do that? Yeah, as I said, the software ecosystem is growing very, very rapidly. So Backstage is built on a plugin architecture. There's this hypothesis, I'm not sure if you have heard, everything that a developer consumes, if it doesn't allow them to customize it using a plugin, it eventually fades out. So if you imagine, what tools do you use as a developer? You use VS Code or Sublime Text or whatever. It allows you to write plugins. You probably use Slack for communication. There are Slack apps. You use GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. It allows you to write apps on this. Imagine all the tools that you use as developer, they're extensions, they're plugins, all of them are platforms. So there's this wonderful guy called Yegi. I think there's a rant from him that eventually all software is going to turn into platforms. If not, they're going to die out. So that was just a quick detour, but Backstage also has a plugin architecture where you can write your own plugins to fit your organization's culture and then basically build your own developer portal. You're not buying something, batteries included, and then try to convert your engineering organization to use Backstage or your developer portal. It's open source. The reason why Spotify open sourced Backstage was they were using it for 5 years, and then they realized it's a very great story, by the way, for open source enthusiasts. They had built their own Kubernetes, and they had launched it before Google did. They had built their own gRPC, and they had launched it before, I don't know who launched gRPC. They had all these great tools. They worked for years, and then they were using it inside the company, but their open source counterparts actually replaced them. They scaled so rapidly that teams inside the company were not able to catch up. So they had to give up on that work and adopt the open source alternative. That's why they thought, And there was not any other developer portal platform out there. That's why I thought we have to open source it. Otherwise, they're going to be a good open source project. It's going to ultimately replace what we have internally. So that's what we have inside the Backstage community. There's about 1,500 contributors. It's only been 2 years. Every week, there are 10 new people joining the community, contributing to Backstage. I'm going to show you some numbers here. It has 19,000 stars on GitHub. There's about 250 companies who have publicly come and said that they're using Backstage to build their developer portal. And then there's about 500 more companies who are still evaluating. Some of the names are Spotify, Netflix, American Airlines, Expedia, and there's new cool ones also joining. So yeah, Backstage is, so I'm going to say that developer portals are something which companies are realizing they need to provide to their developers to make sure they are happy, they don't spend too much time juggling around, they focus on like building their features in the app or the backend. That's what most of the time they do. All right, so now it's time for a demo of Backstage. I'm gonna try and fail because live demos never work. But yeah, let's give it a go. Cool. I think it will work good if I mirror the display so that I see exactly what you are saying. I think it makes sense. All right, the dreaded terminal, but no. Let me go back to Backstage. All right, thank you so much for your patience. This is Backstage. I'm running it locally. You can go to Backstage/Backstage and then directly git clone it, and then you'll have a sample developer portal up and running for you. So as I said, sorry? Size of it? All right. Oh, you can't, cool. Cool, I'm gonna keep it, like, you don't have to read this, so don't worry about like reading it, just get the UI feel. So there are 3 main jobs to be done. Backstage lets you create new services inside your company, following your company's best practices. So there's a problem of fragmentation, I'm not sure if you have heard, but as companies grow, individual teams make their own decisions on what technology stack they're gonna use to build the next thing they're gonna build. So if I join a company, I'm a good Python and JavaScript enthusiast, and I say, let's build this backend in Python, and then no one at the company knows what Python is, and they're not familiar with it, I'm creating fragmentation. Because when I leave the company, which eventually happens, it's not a good world, but when I leave the company, I'm gonna paralyze the company essentially because no other engineers can come and work on it, collaborate on it. So fragmentation definitely happens if you're growing and you're adding more teams. And what you want to do is make templates, make standards inside your company. Take a decision. You like Golang, you have done your research. Let's pick Golang as the backend language. Let's pick MySQL or PostgreSQL as the database stack. Let's pick React or Angular. Like, whatever decisions you need to make, just make it before you expand your company. So these are the templates you see here. This is one software template. So yeah, let's go. I am a new engineer. I joined this company. I'm really excited. It's week 2, and someone comes and says, can you build a new website for our company, for our internal use case, and add some metrics and whatnot? Imagine how many shoulders I need to tap to ask, hey, how do I get a new DNS? Hey, how do I create a new repository? Where should I create that repository? How do I get monitoring configured? How do I make sure I'm following the best security practices? Especially in this remote world, that's why it was taking 2 months for them to do that. But if my company has a developer portal like Backstage, I will come here and say, cool, I like React, and they have a React template. Let's go ahead and create it. So I'm gonna say the new amazing website, because I don't like creating things which are not amazing. So this is the most amazing thing about to happen. And I'm gonna say that my team owns this website, or I can say just I own this website. And then I'm going to say where it's going to be hosted. So I can pick GitHub, GitLab, whatever version control system your company is using. If they are using multiple systems, that's even fine. And I would like to say 20 October website because I create a lot of websites and they definitely clash. So I'm going to take a sip of water. And usually as a developer, you might want to catch a coffee or whatever. But your new website is up and running. What the heck? I don't have to tap any shoulders. I don't have to ask a bunch of questions. I came here and then filled in few details, and I can just start writing my React app. I can start building a form. I can start embedding a graph or whatnot. So as you can see, this new repository is created. It has a bunch of, I can zoom this bit. It has a bunch of editor configs, Babel, Jest. I don't know what these things are. If you're a JavaScript engineer, you would love it. But I can just go to source and the app and then start writing my React code. That's as simple as that. And then it gets re-registered back inside Backstage. So that was the second pillar I talked about. It lets you manage your software, your team's software essentially. So you can visualize that service, whether it's a component, whether it's a data pipeline, whatever you have, you get to see it inside the service software catalog inside Backstage. So I can see the overview, I can see where this is hosted, who owns this, and basically anyone can see this, by the way. So if I create a website, leave the company, someone else comes, they look at this website and they can immediately find out, who created it, what's the state, is it experimental, was it production, which group owned that website and whatnot. By group, I mean the team. So what we call in the Backstage lingo, this is called the entity's homepage. All of your software components, they're gonna have their own homepage where people can come and learn more about them. Configure whatever cards you want here. That's the job of your platform engineers, whoever they are in your company. They're gonna decide what your engineers should view. So if they need to see some pull request statistics, like how the service is evolving, what languages does this service use, they can show this, otherwise they can just hide it. But there are other things, and that's my favorite part about Backstage is that, let's say I pick one service, let's say this one. It's a service, I don't own this, some other team owns, but I'm trying to use this for my own purpose. So I come here, I'm like, who owns this? User guessed, but let's say a team owns this, but I'm gonna ping them on Slack and ask them, hey, how do I use this? Where's the documentation for it? Should I go on Confluence and search it? Should I go on Google Docs and search it? Where should I go and learn more about it? So that's the best part about software catalog, is that you get everything related to that service on the same page. So let me pick one. Let's take Backstage itself, for example. So I have all of the documentation inside Backstage itself, right there. I don't have to know my company uses Confluence or whatever. So are you seeing the pattern that underlying infrastructure has to be there, but I as a developer need not care? And by the way, Backstage follows this docs-like code philosophy, which means that you write your documentation just like you would write your code. So for example, when I created that, any repository, for example, the documentations are stored right here inside the repository. I don't go to an external place. Imagine like a developer's daily routine. They wrote a new API or they deprecated an API. Where do they go to make sure everyone is aware of that? Why should they leave their Sublime Text? Why should they leave their VS Code? They should be able to do all of their job in one place, submit a pull request, and then go home, relax. So that's what we are trying to, that's what companies are doing it with their developer portals. They are saying your developers essentially need three things. They need their IDE to write code. They need their version control system to review that code, merge that code, all that sort of gig. And everything else will be done on a developer portal like Backstage, because We don't want them navigating into hundreds of places. That's like the simplest explanation of Backstage. So yeah, as you can see, I can create new things, I can manage new things. So all the things you saw here. So what is the second most requirement whenever you look at a service, if you're working on it, you want to look at its CI/CD logs, right? You want to see the bills. That's where the CI/CD plugin kicks in. Backstage has support for all the CI/CD providers, essentially. I work at Harness, and we're also a software delivery platform. So we also provide a CI/CD, a great way for you to create pipelines for your services. And then you can also see those logs for that service inside here. So you can see the CI/CD stages, then you can see essentially their logs and whatnot. We are still working on it. It's not released, but we're going to open source this like every other plugin. And this is the harness view. So one thing which Backstage allows is that your developers should get a very simplified view. But if they want to, like if I love cloud and I want to explore things on Azure, I should always be able to go there. Like imagine you're looking at some logs, but you want some more filtering and whatnot. There should be a link here which can take you to the right spot. Otherwise, come here. Don't get buried in those those many configs and whatnot. So yeah, you can always come to Harness to check more about that pipelines, see where it's going. So you can see this is a much more complex, and complex is not a bad word. It's much more feature rich. But do your developers need this daily? The answer is probably no. They want to see whether my last build succeeded or not. If it failed, where it failed, and then just go back to coding. So that's why you get a very simple view on it on a developer portal, and you should have that. As you can see, bunch of tabs here. You can see their Kubernetes deployment. You can see the latest pull request coming. You can see a scorecard of how good your service is, how much code coverage they follow, and whatnot. You can see, I mean, this is a, I can show you one crazy example. There's a plugin called To-Dos plugin, which is of course failing. So I will not be able to show you, but it's a plugin which basically scans the entire code base and finds out how many to-dos you have. So that's a great way to like know what's next. As a product manager, you would love that feature. So yeah, all these plugins are open source, as you can see on backstage.io. You can go to this plugin marketplace. There's hundreds of plugins created by the community to basically integrate your developer portal, which is Backstage, to your existing infrastructure. But let me mention that plugins can come from anywhere. You can build your own plugins, your own private plugins inside your company to connect with your personal, like private service that you might have created. You don't need to open source it. And of course, companies are creating paid plugins nowadays because some of the plugins are really, really good and then basically offers you great features. So yeah, let me make sure I've showed everything. I've shown you plugin marketplace. And then I forgot to mention that you can also explore things. So yeah, if you are willing, imagine I'm a developer, I'm a backend engineer. I want to create a new backend service, but I want to know if my company already provides a bunch of APIs which I can consume, right? Let's say if my company has an API to get information about users who are logged into my system, I should be able to find it. I shouldn't have to like write my own queries and whatnot. So you can come here, see all those APIs. Let's say I pick one pet store API, and then you can see the definition right here. If it's based out of Swagger, however you have documented it, you can see it here. So this gives you a great idea as a developer, like what service. So we like to call it discoverability. Can you discover your existing APIs, your existing services inside your company and then move fast? If you don't have that, you might be doing like a duplicate work by writing it yourself or doing something. I have 15 minutes left, great. So another thing, you can search across your services, across your documentation, because no good documentation site exists without search, right? And this search in itself is a platform. So I can search for, let's say, I'm in a company and I want to create a new service, I will search for users. So I want to know the essential APIs, know the backend services, know data pipelines, everything associated with my query. And you can extend this search. So if you have let's say Confluence, Google Docs, Google Cloud. You can, of course, extend the Backstage search to search with your existing infrastructure. Of course, I'm running this locally. This is a brand new laptop I got. And then this is my week 2 in this company. So I easily do like a full-fledged deployment where you can essentially like do a good walkthrough with the real data, but bear with me here. Yeah, there's tons of other plugins inside Backstage. If you want to know costs, how much you're spending, your team is spending, your department is spending, you can see that. Of course, you can also always see costs associated with a particular service. You can see their lighthouse checks. If you're a web engineer, you would know this tool, how good your website is. This is for exploring GraphQL endpoints for an API. And you can do all kinds of things because now you have a centralized place where engineers are going every day to do their jobs. So you can show them, you can gamify things. So if you want your developers to follow best standards, you can give them scores for doing that, right? So you can show them, okay, you're following, let's say, minimum 90% code coverage. You're following the best standards for documentation, you update them frequently and whatnot. So in this way, you can basically make them feel proud of what they're doing by showing these things. So there's a lot of crazy ideas going on right now of all types of plugins people are creating out there because it's associated with their service. So yeah, these are the 3 pillars, and I'm gonna move on now. So let me go behind the scenes and show you like how you can configure your developer portal using Backstage and how it actually works technically. So yeah, Backstage, whatever you see out there is a bunch of libraries. So do you know this, have you used React and Angular? Are you familiar with those front-end tools? So you know, there's one key difference between React and Angular. React is a library and Angular is a framework. And you might see these terminologies a lot, but a library is usually something you consume and build something. A framework is something which provides you much more and then you deal in itself. So using React, you get it, then you combine it with whatever front-end technologies you have and then build your own website. With Angular, it provides you its own MVC framework and then it's much more bigger. Backstage is a library. So Backstage is not your developer portal, it's not your internal developer platform. You use all these Backstage tools to build your developer portal. So what it provides you is a core. It provides you the basic backend, it provides you a basic website, and then you create a Backstage instance out of it, which we usually call an app. Everything is an app. And then you have plugins. You build your own plugins, you get the plugins which are out there in the open source, you buy plugins. Essentially, every platform needs to have plugins in them. So some of the core philosophies of Backstage and why it's built that way. Backstage is the interface. As I'm gonna say it millionth more time, Backstage is the single pane of glass for all of your underlying infrastructure. It's not your infrastructure. Backstage is not here to give you like the place where you can deploy your services. Backstage will just give you an overview, and that's what most of the times developers need. So it's an aggregator. It's not the actual source of truth. You're not gonna create your users inside Backstage. You're probably doing it in Workday or LDAP group or wherever. Backstage just pulls that information and shows you in a better way, in a much cleaner way, to avoid the cognitive load which developers are going through right now. Backstage is built around autonomy of teams. So teams can do whatever they want. They can create new services. There's no, they shouldn't be blocked to move fast. I mean, we are talking about scaling organizations. So every time if they have to create like 10 new tickets, Jira tickets or whatever tickets, get approvals, all that sort of things, they're blocked, I don't know, about a week before they're about to create new services. All of these things you can automate and then make sure they are doing things independently. Also, autonomy means they can build their own plugins inside the developer portal to cater to their own needs. And yeah, it's built around ownership. Like if you use Backstage, you're one team, like 2-3 engineers, they are not going to own the entire developer portals. Let's say folks who are experts in data science, they're going to build the data hub inside Backstage, and they're going to own it. The platform team only enables that connection. Backstage recognizes all of your software components as entities, and they can be, the most common use case is a component, is a software component. If it's a website, if it's a backend service, if it's a data pipeline, etc. But also APIs, resources, this could be your servers, your cloud resources and everything. Users and groups, basically employees and teams. Domains and systems, if you haven't heard of them, think of a company like Spotify. It's a music app, or think of YouTube. Imagine there's this whole org around podcast. There's this whole org around playlist, for example, and all of the services are associated with it. So you define these domains as systems to basically contain the hundreds of services that make that feature available inside the product. And yeah, you can define relationships between them. So you define, let's say you're building a backend API and you're building a backend service and you're using 5 different APIs. So you define that you're consuming these APIs. If you have an API and if you're an API maintainer, you instantly get to know which all the teams are consuming my API. And then if you publish new changes and if you want to talk to your customers, you'll talk to those services. So when you see Backstage, let me switch tabs. Oh, I can see it there. That's amazing. So let's see. I missed my, so this is the relations I was talking about. So you have an understanding of what all right, I'm not able to make sure it works, but you can get an understanding of what all components, components use depends on other APIs, which teams own them, how are teams connecting to each other. You can get an entire dependency graph just because you have configured it. Yeah, Backstage has a bunch of YAML files because you might be aware if engineers have forgotten how to write code and all they do is write a bunch of YAML files. If you are Kubernetes person, you might remember the syntax a bit, but each and every entity is defined in a YAML structure where you define their name, what they do, and all the relationships that you want there. It lives alongside your Git repository, so you don't basically configure. As I said, Backstage is the aggregator. It's not the actual source of truth. Software templates, as I've demoed before, it basically is a template which new engineers can use to create new things. It increases consistency inside your org. It helps them create things faster. Basically, they don't have to be blocked by a week to create new things. And of course, you can build plugins inside Backstage to extend it. Plugins are essentially, you can create front-end plugins just to show things alongside the service. You can create front-end and back-end plugins to do complicated tasks inside Backstage. But also, there's a third type of plugin where you just create the front-end and then you integrate it to an existing service, existing backend component via a proxy. So the demo I showed you, the Harness CI/CD plugin, it's just on front end and it's always talking to the Harness APIs via the Backstage proxy. That's a very good use case. Here you can see the Circle CI example where it's talking via proxy to the Circle CI, the actual third-party service. Cool, and there's documentation inside it. I'm going to skip it, but you write documentation as code, and Backstage makes sure it pulls it and shows you alongside your service. There's search. Search can be extended to wherever. It can search through your personal files. It can search through your Google Cloud or whatever cloud you use. I shouldn't use Google too much in this conference. Or anywhere, across all of the documentation, across all of your services. And you can deploy it however you want to. It's just another CNCF project. Dockerize it, deploy using Kubernetes, or deploy on bare bones, everything. How do you start? Try it out. Go to Backstage. Create a new Backstage instance. If you're one of the platform engineering folks, if you're, let's say, a VP of engineering or a CTO somewhere, you're a staff engineer somewhere, you might want to create this and work with a couple of teams to see if it actually reduces their time, if it saves their time. So do that proof of concept, and then basically partner with more teams inside your company and basically launch your own developer portal inside your company. Later on, it's an evangelism going on. Developers are not going to use something which they don't like. So you have to make sure you're catering to their own needs. And the best advice I have received or I have given to companies is that, don't start with all the features which a developer portal has to offer. Start simple. Find one problem which your engineering org is struggling with. Consistency, discoverability, whatever, fragmentation. Find the one problem and try to see if your developer portal can solve that. Bunch of resources. Backstage.io is the main website where you can go to. We have monthly community sessions, 2 of them, by the way. There's a doctor session where you can find how people are using Backstage and you can learn from them. And there's a contributor session where if you're an engineer working on Backstage, you can talk more. There's a Discord group. It has, I think, 8,000 members. And there's about 600 people always online. So if you are stuck somewhere, you can always find them. And you can also find me. As I said, Harness has its own plugin for it. Harness is a software delivery platform. It makes sure that your engineers are able to deliver whatever they have written to your end users very fast in a reliable way. And we also love Backstage. We're building, so our customers are already asking, how can we integrate Backstage to Harness? So as of now, we're building plugins for Backstage. But essentially, so I have been in the Backstage community for about 2.5 years. And one of the things that kind of disappoints me is that you need to invest a few engineering resources to get this up and running for about 6 months or even 1 year. So Harness is here to solve that, basically save you time and cost and offer you Backstage. And it's here to fill some gaps. Backstage has a bit of gaps. For example, it doesn't have a good RBAC solution. It doesn't have a good user management solution, audit trails. Generally, if you come from a conservative company like a bank or insurance company, you want these things before you want to try it out. So Harness already has it, and it's going to integrate with Backstage and offer Backstage as a service, essentially.